WNBA is still a few months away, but the Indiana Fever have already been named America's team.
The WNBA as a whole took note when Kelly Kopp returned as president of the Indiana Fever this offseason. But her recent announcement of their 2025 ambitions might permanently alter women's basketball following Caitlin Clark's record-breaking rookie season and an aggressive free agency. Kopp is constructing America's team with a championship, not just trying to compete. Aspirations. Her recently revealed plan is daring and clever, and it might turn the Fever into the NBA's Dallas Cowboys.
So the Indiana Fever's president of basketball and business operations, Kelly Krauskopf, I think that's how you say her name, she recently did an interview with Sportico, and there is so much good information in here, you guys. They kind of recap the Indiana Fever free agency, talk about a lot of things. So I want to go over some of the things that stood out to me in this interview. So if you guys didn't know, Kelly Krauskopf was the original president of basketball operations, and she was originally there from the start of the Indiana Fever team. So back in 2000 up until 2018, she is back there now, but she has been in the WNBA for a while. She has seen how the WNBA has grown over the past few years, and she has also been there with the Indiana Fever when they were a really good.
In a shocking interview with Sports Business Journal, Krauskopf laid out a comprehensive plan that has the basketball world buzzing. Let's break down exactly what she said and what it means for the future of not just the Fever, but possibly the entire league. The Indiana Fever's transformation started when Caitlin Clark's name was called as the first overall pick in the 2024 WNBA draft. But what we're witnessing now is something far beyond just adding a talented rookie, Kelly Kopp, who led the Fever from 2000 to 2008 during their glory years.
She was there when the Fever made 12 straight playoff appearances during her tenure. And so her plan is to get the Indiana Fever back to the place that it was at the beginning of their organization.
Let's start by discussing Krauskopf's basketball philosophy. When asked how she went about creating the 2025 roster, she didn't mince words like "we're about winning." This may seem apparent, but it marks a significant change for a team that played in the WNBA wilderness for years prior to Clark's arrival. During Krauskopf's previous tenure, the Fever made 12 consecutive playoff appearances, establishing a level of consistency that she is determined to restore. My goal was to get us back to that level of consistency. Caitlin Clark's development and career path greatly depend on Krauskopf emphasizing consistent excellence year after year, rather than sporadic playoff appearances. The last thing the Fever wants is to waste Clark's best years cycling through rebuilds or hovering around 500 basketball points.
So Sportico asked her, as you approach free agency and trades this offseason, how involved were the Fever's franchise players, Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, and Kelsey Mitchell? And obviously, you guys, that is the big three in Indiana. I think all of us knew that going into free agency, those were the three players that would be protected. Those were the three players that weren't going to be going anywhere. As much as people were saying, oh, Kelsey Mitchell might not come back, I always, without a doubt in my mind, thought that she would be returning. Why wouldn't she be returning? But this is what Kelly had to say. She said, you always want to pick the brains of the players. I did it with Tamika Catchings and others. So I think it's smart business to inform some of your key players of some of the targets that we're looking at. It's not necessarily asking for their sign off. It's more of a let's talk about this.
The manner Krauskopf is treating roster formation is especially intriguing. In contrast to some executives who hold player involvement at a distance, she actively involves her stars in the process. I always want to ask the players questions, and I did so with Tamika Catchings and other players. Reading between the lines, I believe it's shrewd business to let some of your key players know about some of the targets we're considering. This implies that Clark will have a significant say in future teammates and the team's overall course. The player empowerment strategy has proven successful in the NBA, with teams like the Miami Heat and Golden State Warriors. And Krauskopf obviously views it as crucial to creating a dynasty around Clark.
On to say, and then we had eager players in our locker room now that wanted to be a part of recruiting, if you will, and talking to players to help bring them to Indianapolis. She said every single player that we brought in, those were all intentional moves to add to what we see and what we envision as a successful blueprint. Now, Aaliyah Boston also did an interview recently where she was asked about this, and she talked about the fact that they were talking to the front office. And so it seems like, to me, I'm totally speculating here, but if you're reading between the lines, looking at all the different reports that were coming out, it seems like Caitlin Clark obviously had a big voice in which players they were bringing in. Aaliyah Boston had a big voice in what players they were bringing in, and Kelsey Mitchell also had that voice. There were also reports, like we talked about in other videos, where the Fever players said, please protect our locker room. And so even when some of the Fever fans were surprised maybe by some of the signings, these players were in on these signings. These players wanted these new players to be coming in.
The Fever's free agency strategy going into 2025 has been carefully planned out, and Kopp emphasized that each player we added was purposefully done so that they could contribute to what we see and what we hope is a winning design. This is about identifying particular items that enhance Clark's distinct skill set, not about adding talent at random. What precisely is this pattern based on their previous actions? And keep in mind that the Fever were thrashed by Connecticut in the first round of the 2024 playoffs when they were forced to slow down and play a half-court game. Kate Copps has clearly identified this as a fatal flaw they're addressing for 2025. Fever are building a team designed to play at a blistering pace while spacing the floor to maximize Clark's transcendent passing ability. Within this perspective, the recent arrivals of Victoria Vivians and Natasha Howard make perfect sense. Howard is a versatile floor running forward with championship experience from her stint with Seattle and New York, who can stretch the defense with her shooting.